I am here with Jacob Hornberger, who is a candidate for President of the United States of America, seeking the Libertarian Party nomination. Um, so I have a list of questions that we're going to go through. The first thing that I wanted to ask you about is a little bit about your background. Could you introduce yourself and your work history and your educational history and so forth?
Yeah, I'm Jacob Hornberger. I am president and founder of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which is a nonprofit educational foundation that advances the principal case for libertarianism. I've done that for 30 years, and I should emphasize they don't endorse my candidacy. They're a nonprofit foundation. I grew up in Laredo, Texas, which is situated on the Texas-Mexican border. I grew up on a farm on the Rio Grande. I ended up going to college at Virginia Military Institute, where I got a BA in economics, and where I also got commissioned as an infantry officer in the U.S. Army Reserves. I went to law school at the University of Texas. That was interrupted with one semester of infantry school at Fort Benning, Georgia. I got my law degree. I returned to my hometown of Laredo to practice law in partnership with my father, and ended up practicing law as a trial attorney in both civil and criminal trial for 12 years. And I ultimately ended up in Dallas, where I also served as an adjunct professor of law and economics at the University of Dallas, in addition to my law practice there in Dallas. And then I accepted a position in 1987 with the Foundation for Economic Education, which is the first libertarian educational foundation in the country. And after 2 years there, I left to form the Future of Freedom Foundation. And then last November 2nd, I announced my candidacy for the Libertarian Party presidential nomination.
So, based on your career experience, can you highlight what managerial and executive experience you have that you think would transfer well if you were elected president, that you feel like you'd be able to manage the huge government infrastructure?
Yeah, I helped manage my law practice when I was in partnership with my dad. He passed away in 1982, and I decided that after a year of soul searching that I did not want to end up practicing law in a small town. Even though I had a nice practice, I'd inherited his practice. And I decided I was go to Dallas and start my own practice from scratch. And I did that. And so I managed a law practice, a sole practitioner, but I managed that law office for 4 years. And then I've managed the Future of Freedom Foundation for 30 years.
So why are you running for president?
I want to live in a free society. I mean, that's what my life is devoted to. That's why I left the law practice to devote my life to the libertarian philosophy. And I want everyone to live in a free society. That's clearly what we're not living in today. This is one of the problems that we face in America, that most Americans honestly believe that this is a free society. And this is what distinguishes us libertarians from non-libertarians, or at least one of the things that distinguishes us. That we understand, we've broken through the indoctrination. And when I discovered libertarianism, when I was still down in Laredo practicing law, it was a revelation for me. I realized I'd been lied to all these years, especially in the government public schools, that we live in a free country. And so when I discovered libertarianism, this changed the course of my life. And I said, I've taken these people on in the educational arena, Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives who have destroyed freedom in this country. And I've taken them on in the educational arena for 30 years. But I finally said, I've gotten to a point in my life where that's just not enough for me. I'm going to seek the Libertarian Party presidential nomination because I want to take these people on, the people who have destroyed our freedom and our well-being, in a more direct way. And that's running against them for president of the United States, running against Donald Trump, running against Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders or whoever they would have put up. That's why I'm running. I want to advance freedom in this country. I want to achieve a free society. And we do that with libertarianism.
So how would you describe the libertarian philosophy to a voter who might be unfamiliar with libertarianism?
Yeah, that's a good question, because libertarianism always or almost always shocks people who think they're free. because they look at libertarianism and they say, gosh, what are you all about? Well, we're about freedom. Well, what are you talking about? That's so strange. We already are free as Americans. Well, they're not free as Americans. They embody the words of Johann Goethe, who said, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. And so what we need to do as libertarians is explain to people what we're about. And we're about a genuinely free society. What does that mean? That means that you have a right to live your life any way you choose, any choices you make in life, so long as your conduct does not involve the initiation of force or fraud against another person. So in other words, as long as you're not raping, stealing, burglarizing, trespassing, murdering people, and violating their rights through the initiation of force or fraud in any way, you're free to make whatever choices you want in life. That's what we libertarians stand for. Now, the average American might say, well, gosh, that sounds really good, Jacob. I guess I'm a libertarian. Well, except where the rubber meets the road. And that is on the application of this principle. We believe that Americans should be free to keep everything they earn, and they decide what to do with it. No IRS, no income tax. You make it, you keep it, and no forced charity, no coerced charity like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, farm subsidies, education grants, foreign aid to dictators, none of that. That you have a right for yourself to decide what to do with your own money. You have a right to ingest whatever you want to ingest, no matter how harmful it is, heroin, cocaine, meth, opioids, and so forth, because that's the essence of freedom, to live your life and make your own way as long as your conduct is peaceful. We believe in a limited government republic rather than a national security state that consists of a vast military empire, foreign interventionism, foreign troops and foreign bases and foreign lands, the CIA, the national security state. So when you start looking at the application of the libertarian, what we call the non-aggression principle, that you will not initiate force against other human beings, that's what all of a sudden separates a lot of Americans who say, oh, no, Jacob, I want to be free, but I want the government to take care of me, to watch over me, to give me my sustenance, my education, my retirement, my health care, and all this other stuff. I want the government to be a massive national security state to keep me safe and secure. And so that's where the rubber meets the road with respect to libertarians and non-libertarians.
So when a candidate runs for political office, generally they pick 3 issues that are the focus of their campaign, and those are the ones they highlight most. And of course, they'll talk about any issue that media asks about. But what are your top 3 issues in your campaign?
First of all, it's foreign policy. I mean, I think it's important to focus on the areas where there is death. I mean, because government causes a lot of problems with its inefficiencies, its regulations, its controls, and so forth. But people can, violation of civil liberties, for example, but people can usually bounce back from those kind of things. They can survive it, they can circumvent it, and so forth. Death has a finality all its own that obviously precludes people from bouncing back. So the first thing I look at is a government policy causing death to human beings? And clearly, U.S. government foreign policy is doing that. That would be at the top of my list. You've got, Iraq, Afghanistan. I mean, they've been killing people for what, 20, 30 years? I mean, it's incredible. And on top of that, there's Yemen, there's Syria, there's Africa, there's Latin America. I mean, it's incredible what these people are doing in terms of death and destruction. And it's important to keep in mind that none of the people they're killing, none of them are invading the United States. This is all what we call foreign interventionism. The national security establishment meddling in the affairs of other countries, serving as a world's policeman, and wreaking massive death and destruction. We've got sanctions and embargoes. Sanctions, for example, against the people of Iran in the midst of this corona crisis are killing people. Now, they were killing people before the crisis, but now they're dying in mass because they can't get the medical supplies. And I mean, you see shortages here with America's centrally planned healthcare system of masks and testing kits. This is nothing compared to what's going on in Iran because of these sanctions, along with their centrally planned healthcare system as well. So I favor bringing all the troops home from everywhere, not just the Middle East and Afghanistan. Korea, Europe, World War II's over, Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, Afghanistan, bring them all home and discharge them if they're not necessary. And then talk in terms of dismantling the national security apparatus that came into existence after World War II and restore a limited government republic to our land with a basic fundamental military force that is oriented entirely to defending the United States in the highly unlikely possibility of an invasion. That's issue one. Issue two, healthcare. Now, I recently elevated this to number two because, before the coronavirus crisis, it was an esoteric debate. I mean, I've longed for 30 years. I've called for a separation of healthcare in the state, and I've argued consistently for 30 years. There is no other way to get around the healthcare crisis. Now, I'm talking about the crisis before the coronavirus crisis hit. We know we've had a healthcare crisis. Since the 60s, we've had a healthcare crisis, ongoing, perpetual, and out of control, soaring healthcare costs that bankrupt people, insurance going out the roof, everything. Doctors hating what they do. It's just been a total morass. And one of the first things we did at the Future of Freedom Foundation was publish a book called The Dangers of Socialized Medicine, 1994. It's as applicable today. But that was a fairly esoteric debate. Get rid of the government involvement, Medicare and Medicaid, which are the root causes of the out-of-control healthcare costs. That would bring healthcare costs down to a reasonable level, which is where they were before Medicare and Medicaid were adopted. Nobody had major medical insurance because they didn't need it, because healthcare costs were so stable and low. So that's the root of the crisis. But then the coronavirus crisis hits, and man, you've got three dysfunctional systems that Democrats and Republicans have foisted on our land that are all coming together. You've got a centrally planned healthcare system. Central planning is a core concept of the socialist paradigm. That's why you have these shortages and this chaos and mandates and orders and all this other what Ludwig von Mises called planned chaos, along with the base of these socialist programs, Medicare and Medicaid, that are the cause of the out-of-control soaring expenses of healthcare. You've got a dysfunctional economic system that has left people impoverished with the massive, what we call the welfare state and the warfare state that has plundered and looted people for decades with income taxation and withholding that has left them without money. And then you've got the Federal Reserve that is right now printing money like it was going out of style, which they've done for decades, looting people that way. Well, this is not an esoteric debate anymore. This is life and death. I mean, the reason, now we all know that this pandemic would kill people anyway, no question about that. But because you have this dysfunctional healthcare system, that the infection rates and the death rates are magnified. And that's why in this general election, if I were accorded the honor of this nomination for the Libertarian Party, I would take it right to Trump and Biden, that their system is bringing death to the American people, unnecessary death. I favor a free market healthcare system, a total separation of healthcare in the state. Just like our ancestors separated church and state. No Centers for Disease Control, no FDA, no President's Task Force on healthcare issues, no licensing laws, just no Medicare, no Medicaid, just a total separation. The end of all government involvement, a total free market healthcare system. It'd be the best thing that could ever happen. And you would see the infection rates and the death rates reducing. And so Americans really have a choice this time around that involves life and death. If they want to roll the dice with Biden and Trump and think that they're going to lead them out of this morass, which I don't think is going to go away anytime soon, stick with them, vote for them. I am offering a way out of this through libertarian principles. Now, the third one's a little problematic because it can be a range of issues. The drug war causes horrendous suffering, especially among African Americans and Hispanics. I mean, the prisons are filled with African Americans. The noted academician Michelle Alexander calls the drug war the new Jim Crow. And that's what it is. It's a highly racially discriminatory program. And it's futile. I mean, the more sentences they give out, the worse things get. They've been waging this thing for decades. And the only people who are benefiting are the federal judges, the state judges, the prosecutors, the DEA agents, law enforcement, and the drug lords, all of whom would be put out of business with drug legalization. So I favor legalizing all drugs. Another issue for third place would be the Federal Reserve. I mean, it's highly destructive. You can tell what they're doing with this stimulus package. It's this massive devaluation of the monetary system. It's going to wipe out people at the bottom of the economic ladder. And that we've heard that famous saying from libertarians, end the Fed. Well, now we're seeing why that term has meaning. You have immigration controls, which are a socialist program that both Democrats and Republicans support. This program brings death and suffering to people, countless deaths of innocent people. This is a socialist program. It's based on central planning. It comes with a police state, highway checkpoints, roving border patrol checkpoints, trespasses onto farms and ranches, including my farm that I grew up on. They could just come onto our farm without a warrant anytime they wanted and search our farm. And so I would say these three would all qualify for third place.
Thank you. I assume you've read the Libertarian Party platform. Is there any plank in the Libertarian Party platform that you disagree with? And if so, why?
I disagree with the plank that talks about certain programs being phased out. I mean, the party platform is very good in terms of abolishing and ending certain programs. But then there's other programs, for whatever reason, they talk in terms of phasing out programs like Social Security or something. I don't see why the distinction. I mean, we stand for a free society. And a free society is necessarily one, as I said before, where people have a right to keep what they earn and decide for themselves what to do with it, which means the end of all forced charity. And the problem with transitions is that it keeps that infringement and freedom intact during the term of the transition. And I think it's much better that we libertarians stand on principle and we say, this is what a free society entails. If you want a free society, this is what you got to do. If you don't want a free society, okay, fine. But if you want a free society, I think it's incumbent on us libertarians to describe exactly what a free society is. And it's also a way for us libertarians to have confidence in freedom. We should, if anybody should not fear a genuinely free society, it's us libertarians. We know that freedom produces the best of everything. We know it works. So there's no need to transition to freedom. All you have to do is make the case for freedom itself. A good example of this is like slavery. There was different ways to handle slavery. Libertarians back then, or people who were concerned about slavery, could have said, well, the slaves, or their plight is very horrible, so we need to reform slavery. And so they would get, fewer lashings and get laws passed, shorter work hours, better food, better healthcare. And they say, oh, well, see, we've helped the slaves. Another one would be to say, well, the slaves are not ready for freedom. And so we have to transition to freedom. So we'll spend the next 20 years transitioning the slaves to freedom. And then the third one, the one I would have supported, says, no, don't transition to anything. Don't reform anything. Just end slavery. Just end the infringement on slavery. You don't have to worry about people being ready. Human beings are very resilient. And that's I think that would be one objection that I would have in the Libertarian Party platform. Now, I should point out, just full disclosure, that the party is the platform is basically pro-choice on abortion. I'm pro-life. So that would be a distinction as well.
So in your campaign for the presidential nomination, how many state conventions have you visited in person, and how many have you visited remotely?
I think by the time of the shutdown, I had attended 18 conventions. And I think remotely, I've done one or two. I get mixed up now because I've been doing so many of these things. I think in total, I've done about 19 or 20. And then when you add on the ones that I attended last spring in 2019, that was another 8 or 9 or 10 or so. But during the course of this race, I've attended about 18, 19, or 20 and participated in about 9 presidential debates. And then with the 3 that I'm participating in this week, by Sunday, I will have participated in 12 LP presidential debates.
So who's your campaign manager?
Jake Porter from the Iowa LP, and I guarantee he's the best LP campaign manager in the party.
Do you have a coordinator in all 50 states?
I'd have to check with him. I mean, I know that they divide everything up. We have a volunteer coordinator, and she's in charge of all that, and they handle everything. I don't get involved with that. I just delegate it to them. And so I don't know whether they specifically have a coordinator in each state. I know they have coordinators. I don't know whether they're regional or statewide or what. So I don't know.
How much money has your campaign raised so far?
They just sent me the figure and I didn't look at it. I'm not really sure.
Do you have a ballpark, or you have no idea?
I would say ballpark probably around 50,000, more or less. I could be wrong on that. You know, I'm not really positive.
Where can people
I've got my guy that handles all that too.
where can people find out more about your campaign?
The best place is jacobforliberty.com. I mean, that's where I'm keeping people apprised of everything we're doing. I mean, I loved going to these party conventions. This was a transformative event in my life. I mean, my life at the Future of Freedom Foundation is sort of like ivory tower-ish. You're advancing liberty with articles and videos and presentations and so forth, and you're doing conferences and seminars. But then I got into this race, and it has truly been a transformative event, but it's been fantastic. I mean, I've loved going to these conventions. The energy at these conventions was unbelievable. I mean, you could feel the electricity in the room. Membership was skyrocketing. It had gone like 3,000 or 4,000 people since last fall, an increase. And that's how I feed off of people in the audience. People sometimes say, "Oh, Jacob, you preach to the choir." And I say, "Yeah, isn't that great?" Because that's how I get my energy. Is the libertarians, you feed off that energy. And then the shutdown came, and it's just been, totally different. But we haven't skipped a beat. We've moved everything online. We haven't let up at all. We're fighting hard for this nomination. We've got videos on there. We've got podcasts like this one. We've got Ask Me Anything's live streaming every Tuesday night. And we've got all kinds of other things planned to win this nomination and hopefully move right in to the general election with what we're doing.
So what social media platforms do you have a presence on?
Oh, we've got Jacob for Liberty at Facebook, and that's where I'm posting a lot of our stuff, and where we've got a social media team consisting of 3 guys that are really experts, 3 libertarians that handle all my social media. We're on Twitter, they're on Instagram. Most of what I post is on our campaign website. And yeah, I should have told you that I've got a blog section there where I'm posting articles against the Trump administration, against the Biden, what they're doing on the coronavirus crisis. And I'm posting videos there, both intra-party issues as well as outside the party, general election type issues. I've got, of course, appearances, media appearances, and so forth. And then that is then transferred over to Facebook, but I'm doing some posting there myself now, making some comments, sharing some articles that I think are important, outside articles. Like recently, I posted an article about Chalmers Johnson, who is one of the real giants. He's not a libertarian, he's deceased now, but giants with respect to foreign policy. I want to expose people to his works. And then I let my social media team handle all the Twitter and the Instagram.
So suppose you get the Libertarian Party nomination. Short of getting elected president, do you have any less ambitious goals that we can use as metrics to judge the success of your campaign? For example, are you trying to maximize votes, to sell books, to increase party membership, or what would be your smaller goals than winning the election?
Adhering to principle. That to me is everything. If I finish this campaign and Libertarian Party members say, "Jacob, you represented our philosophy perfectly," that would be the high point of my life, or one of the high points of my life. That's my measure of success, to get out there and fight this campaign to win. Now, people sometimes say, "Jacob, do you want to run an educational campaign?" Because I'm the president of an educational foundation. No, I don't. I have no interest in doing that. I want to fight a campaign to beat these people, because I understand that libertarianism is the only way out of this morass. There's no other way out. And now, am I delusional? No. I have no pretensions about what the odds are of a libertarian winning the presidency. 0.5%, maybe, if even that much. But it's like what, 3PO, Han Solo said to 3PO, "Don't tell me the odds. Let's just get in there to win, but using pure libertarian principles." This is what distinguishes my campaign is that let's get in there and fight as who we are against these people, both conservatives and liberals. Fight against them with pure libertarian principles. These are our greatest asset. I believe that since the 90s. I served 3 terms on the Libertarian Party Platform Committee. And I believed, and that was why I joined the party in the first place. I read the platform and I said, my gosh, this really is a party of principle. And that's why I joined the party. I thought it was all a bunch of mush and conservatism and liberalism and trying to get votes and just watering down the platform. And a friend of mine who was on the platform committee, he was asking me to join the platform committee. And I said, no, I'm not interested in that stuff. I'm interested in principles. Who was
that friend?
That was Bill Evers, who was a giant in the Libertarian Party in the 90s. He then later went to the Republicans and served in I guess it was the George W. Bush administration in the Department of Education. And I think now he's with the Independent Institute. But he told me, he says, have you read the party platform? And I said, no, I don't need to read the party platform. I know it's just a bunch of watered down nonsense. And so he says, let me send it to you. Will you read it? And I said, sure. Well, I read this thing and I was bowled over. I mean, this was a pure libertarian manifesto, and that's why I joined the party. I believe that our principles are our greatest asset, and there's a lot of people in the party that don't think that. They think that our principles are an albatross or a liability. Well, I think it's only because they either don't believe in those principles or they don't know how to defend them. And nothing worse can happen to a good cause than to have it ineptly defended. I say, let's go into this thing with pure principles. And that's how it would measure our success. And will the money come in? Well, if people like our principles, the money will come in. If they say, Jacob, I've looked at your principles and I've examined them and I just don't agree, and there's a lot of people like that, I just can't send you any money, I can't vote for you. Okay, that's fine. I can understand that. But at least we fight. And if we go down, we go down. It's who we are, being true to ourselves, which are libertarians. We are not Republican lights. We are not Democrat lights. We are not libertarian-leaning conservatives or libertarian-leaning Democrats. We are libertarians, and that's what kind of campaign I want to run, and that's how I will measure my successes. How well did I defend our philosophy?
Have you sought the presidential nomination before or run as a candidate for another office?
I have.
Tell me about your earlier campaigns.
Okay, in 2000, I got into a political battle with Harry Brown, who had been the 1996 presidential candidate, and then he was running for re-election in 2000. He and I got into an unfortunate political fight, and I was chagrined over the outcome of that fight or how it had proceeded. So I went to the convention in 2000, and I threw my hat in the ring for 2 days or so. And I got smashed, not surprisingly. But that technically was running for the nomination. I mean, I was at the convention, I threw my hat in the ring. 2 years later, I ran for U.S. Senate here in Virginia as an independent, and ended up losing that against John Warner, a big famous Republican who's no longer with us, but got smashed there too.
Why did you run as an independent rather than as a libertarian?
That was the remnants of the fight that I'd gotten into with Brown and the party hierarchy in the 2000 race, that there were members of the Virginia party hierarchy who were closely aligned with the party hierarchy and the Brown campaign. And they were upset with me that I had gotten involved in this political battle within the party. So when I was going to run for U.S. Senate, you needed to get 10,000 valid signatures, which meant you had to get 15,000 valid signatures. And it was quite arduous because here in Virginia, they require that you get your signatures from all over the state, not just in certain areas. And not only that, you have to get your signature gatherers have to be in the district in which you're getting the signatures or an adjoining district. So this obviously precluded me from going down to areas like Richmond, Virginia, or in the southwestern part of the state. So it's a very arduous process. So I needed help. And the party hierarchy made it very clear they were not going to lift a finger for me, not get me any signatures at all, which would leave me hanging to get my own signatures. But I did it. I got a few friends together. I hired a professional petition gatherer to help me get those outlying areas and to help me get signatures around the state. And we pulled it off. And the Secretary of State said, I think that at that time we were the earliest petition gatherers in the history of Virginia to get on the ballot to get certified. And I got certified. And we had pulled it off. Now, at that point, I still would have wanted to run as an LP member because I think I could have gotten ballot status for us. All we needed to get was 10% of the vote to get major party status, which would have meant no petitioning at all. And I ended up getting 7%, And so I was close. And I have no doubts to this day that if I had run as an LP member, I could have gotten the 10%. But I was too concerned about the party hierarchy. I mean, they were totally opposed to my candidacy. And I could have gone over their heads and gone to the state convention and said, make me the nominee over their heads. But I was just too concerned that if you don't have the party hierarchy behind you, it's too dicey. They can do too many bad things to you. And so I figured the best thing to do is just run as an independent at this point.
When did you realize you were a libertarian?
1970, 78. I walked into the public library of my hometown of Laredo. I was a trial attorney. I was 27 years old, or 28. And I was disillusioned with politics. I was a Democrat. I'd grown up as a Democrat. In the 5th grade, I campaigned for John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. I met Johnson at a political rally my dad took me to at the LBJ Ranch in Johnson City. And when I came back, I was on the Legal Aid Board of Trustees, which provided free legal services to the poor. I was the ACLU representative in Laredo as a lawyer. But I was disillusioned with politics. I had supported some Democratic Party candidates, and I didn't like politics. And so I didn't like all the double dealing and the double crossing and all the stuff that comes with politics, the sordid stuff. So I went to the public library looking for something to read, and I went over into the political science section, and I found 4 little books called Essays on Liberty, different colored books, and my eyes were drawn to them, and I opened them up, and it was a road to Damascus experience. I was just shocked at what I was reading. I mean, the scales were just falling from my eyes right there in that public library. And I checked out all 4 books, and I went over and pored over them. They had been published by the Foundation for Economic Education. And the guy who was really responsible for changing the course of my life was Leonard Reed, who founded FEE, as it's called, FEE. And that was the group that ultimately offered me the job. But it was discovery of those 4 books that absolutely changed the course of my life.
So, what if you were elected president, but Congress was solidly Republican or Democrat? Would you be able to enact and implement your agenda with an obstructionist Congress? How would you work with or around those who disagree with you?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. The answer is yes and no. That a libertarian president would be able to do unbelievable things with respect to moving America in a better direction of liberty, peace, prosperity, harmony with the people of the world. Number one, I would bring all the troops home from everywhere, as I indicated earlier. Bring them all home, but that's not all. Discharge them into the private sector. So you end up getting rid of that huge load. I mean, we can see the out of control spending and debt. I mean, even more so with this corona crisis. I mean, these people are out of control. Before the corona crisis, they were spending, big spender Trump was spending $1 trillion more than what the government brings in with taxes. I mean, even Hillary Clinton might not have spent that much money. And now it's gone. I mean, the floodgates are open. It's clear that the national debt's probably going to reach $30 trillion before too long. So you bring all the troops home, you discharge them, that saves gobs of money. At the same time, you start closing military bases. The president can do that. He's the commander in chief. He doesn't need congressional permission to do that. Discharging people, reducing the huge size. We don't need all these military bases here. I mean, in the olden days, the 1800s, they had bases, forts to protect the cities or communities from Native American attacks. Well, there's no Native American attacks anymore. Lift all sanctions and embargoes that have been set by executive decree, especially with Iran and North Korea. I mean, these people are suffering enough with this coronavirus crisis. They're dying en masse. And all they're doing in the Trump administration and the Democrats is maintaining these sanctions. It's horrific. It's what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil, where you have good people. These are not evil people. Good people doing evil things and convinced that they're doing good with it. I would lift all sanctions immediately that have been set by executive decree. I'd go to Congress and ask them to lift all embargoes that have been set by law, including the long-term embargo against Cuba. I mean, it's just an absolute immoral disaster. One of the things you can do also is pardon all nonviolent offenders in the federal system, especially the nonviolent drug offenders, which would empty the prisons of countless African Americans. And when I was campaigning in North Carolina as part of the primary system there, which I ended up winning on Super on Super Tuesday, I learned about a man named Michael Holmes, African American guy, that got, when he was 23 years old, a 200-year jail sentence for a nonviolent drug offense, selling cocaine to a narc. I mean, that's just vicious. That's just brutal. He's now in his 50s, and they still won't let him out. It's just horrendous. So I would pardon all nonviolent offenders. I'd pardon Edward Snowden. I mean, his only crime, if you call it a crime, I put it in quotation marks, is telling the truth about the national security state. Julian Assange, same thing. He just told the truth. And Ross Ulbricht, another example. These are all people that don't deserve to be in jail. They deserve to be pardoned, along with all other whistleblowers who have disclosed the truth about the national security state. One of the big things a libertarian president can do is with respect to the debt ceiling. Now, we see that these people don't give a hoot about the debt ceiling, and yet it's their law. I mean, Congress has set a ceiling for the maximum amount of debt the federal government can incur. And why is that ceiling there? Because it's an acknowledgement that too much debt is a very bad thing for a country. And you can see all these Republicans and libertarian-leaning conservatives, and they're all saying, "Oh, the debt is a threat to national security." Well, where is that going now? They're all supporting the stimulus package that, by their own admission, is a threat to national security. So they're all violating national security at this point. Well, when the debt ceiling comes up, the Republicans always make a big fuss of, "Oh, we're not going to let them do it again." And Trump did this, the government's going to close down. And well, we all knew the outcome of this. They were going to cave. Republicans and conservatives always cave when it comes to liberty and limited government. And so Trump caved. It was no big surprise. He lets the debt ceiling be raised, and he brings all the federal workers back, pays them their back pay. I mean, what was the point of all this? A libertarian president would enforce that debt ceiling. That's what I would do. I would say, ladies and gentlemen in Congress, you know that this day was coming where no more borrowing. And so that's it. No more new debt. Now, they would say, well, that means the federal government's going to have to close down. Yep, that's the way it's going to have to be, isn't it? And then a libertarian wouldn't cave. He would sit there and say, just shut it down until you are able to live within your means. Taxes equal revenues. And at that point, the thing would stay closed down, and everybody realized that nobody's paying attention. It wouldn't matter. That's why they end these shutdowns so quickly, because people are figuring out that life goes on. You don't really need, these non-essential functions of government on the federal level. And people start figuring that out. Hey, well, the Department of Education's not working, Jacob, and agriculture and labor and FCC and DEA. Yeah, they're all shut down. Isn't that great? And I think those are things that a libertarian president could really do. And then at the same time, get the American people to come down on their members of Congress to do things like end the drug war. I mean, this thing is teetering. It's on its last legs, clearly. That's where you could get public opinion, write your congressman, pressure them to end this evil, immoral, destructive, deadly, crooked, and corrupt government program. And then if Congress still balks, a libertarian president could, in the next 2 years, say to the American people, help me out. Get Libertarian Party members elected to Congress. Let's start putting Libertarian Party members in Congress to stop these obstructionist Democrats and Republicans from bringing liberty and peace and prosperity and harmony to our land. And then all of a sudden, 2 years after the Libertarian president's elected, now Americans are looking at putting LP members in Congress. Now we're talking about some major fundamental changes in this country.
How long have you been a member of the Libertarian Party?
I joined initially in, I think it was 1990, and I stayed a member to around 2002. And then I left the party in 2002, stayed away until about 2, maybe 3 years ago, and rejoined. I don't know what that total is in numbers.
Have you been active in your state and county affiliate?
No.
Have you served in party leadership positions?
I served 3 terms on the platform committee.
And do you vote Libertarian?
Every time.
What are some of President Trump's best and worst, or well, let's just go for one. What is President Trump's best and worst accomplishments, in your opinion?
I think his best accomplishment is standing for gun rights. I mean, he's fairly good on gun rights. He wavers whenever there's a big massacre, gun violence. He wavers, but by and large, I think he's been very good on gun rights. His worst is breaking his promise to bring these troops home from these wars. I mean, he's clearly in the grips of these generals. He's enthralled by the generals. He comes into office and surrounds himself with the generals. He never stood a chance. You know, he said he was going to bring the troops home. It's been 3 years or so, and he still has them there killing people, dying for nothing. I mean, the soldiers that are dying in Afghanistan are clearly dying for nothing. The soldiers that are dying in Iraq are dying for nothing. Syria, dying for nothing. Somalia, I mean, imagine this. They're dying in Somalia. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I think that is his greatest catastrophe, that he let the generals take charge. And that's why he can't bring them home. The generals are ruling the roost here. And he brings people like John Bolton into his administration. So, yeah, I think that's been the biggest disaster, is maintaining all of this foreign interventionism. What Trump should have done the very first day in office, what I would do if I were the president, is just issue an order to the Secretary of Defense. Bring them all home now. Right now, just bring them home. And then as they're reaching American shores, issue them their discharge papers. Put them into the private sector. Be the greatest thing, or one of the greatest things that could ever happen to this country.
How would a libertarian president have dealt with the coronavirus?
Well, when you're dealing with the system they have in place, that we get asked that question: how would you libertarians handle this? Well, what they mean by that is, what would you do to handle this system differently from President Trump? Well, libertarianism has never purported to be a philosophy that shows Democrats and Republicans how to run their crooked and corrupt system. It has never purported to do that. An analogy of this is like education. You've got a total mess in public schooling. I mean, you have for decades. So people come up to say, well, what's your plan for making the public schools work? We don't have a plan for making the public schools work. I mean, and people say, "Oh, you libertarians are so impractical." Well, we don't purport to make their systems work, because their systems are inherently defective. So Trump is running a healthcare system that's based on what's called central planning. This is a socialist construct. It's a top-down command and control system that is based on what's called central planning. Government bureaucrats planning the healthcare decisions for the country. That's what the Centers for Disease Control is all about. It's what the FDA is about. It's what President Trump's task force on healthcare, whatever it's called, on the coronavirus, is all about. It's what the DEA is all about. Well, this is an inherently defective system. Socialism is an inherently defective system. It cannot be made to work. And this is, of course, what I've been saying about healthcare for 30 years, that anybody who thinks that they're going to make the healthcare system work, including libertarian-leaning conservatives, including libertarians like health savings accounts, is living in la-la land. It's not a broken system, as the mainstream press often says. It's an inherently defective system. When you've got a paradigm where you've reached a dead end, you can stick with that paradigm, but all you're going to do is get more of the same, or you can move to a new system. And that's what I'm advocating here for the American people. If you like the system, the healthcare system that Democrats and Republicans have in place, the centrally managed, centrally planned system, stick with them. Vote for Biden, vote for Trump. Won't matter. You're going to get the same thing, and you're going to live or die with the consequences. What I favor is not a way to make their system work efficiently. I can't make their system work efficiently. I'm no better a central planner than Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Nobody is a good central planner. It's their system that's defective. I favor a free market system, which means a total separation of healthcare in the state. Get rid of all central planning. Get rid of the Centers for Disease Control, FDA, DEA, his task force. Get rid of Medicare, Medicaid, a total free market system. It is the only way out of this, Chuck. There is no other way. Now, a free market produces the best of everything. We see that in our history. A free market system is our heritage. Why are we sitting with this crooked, corrupt, decrepit Soviet Union style healthcare system. And look what the left wants to do. They want even more of this socialism. That's not even logical. Their socialist system has failed. It's a total debacle, and they want to cure it with more socialism. That's ridiculous. So I stand for an entirely different system, a libertarian system, not only on healthcare, but on the economy. Leave people free to keep everything they earn, that they can save money. They have a nest egg. Look how nobody's got a nest egg, or few people have a nest egg to get them through 1, 2, 3 months of unemployment here. It's exposing what this welfare warfare state way of life has done. It's left people penniless. And then you've got this dysfunctional monetary system, again, which is socialist central planning, that they're now using to bail out these corporations and big companies, and it's crooked and corrupt scheme, send out all these little morsels to people of $1,200 checks, which is going to debase the currency around the corner. So to answer your question, I favor new systems instead of the dead end systems, because these new systems, free market systems, are the only, and I repeat, only, circle only, italicize only, bold print only way out of this left life and death morass that we are now facing in this country.
So, Jacob, we're broadcasting on a gaming website. Tell me about your hobbies. Do you play any video games or board games or card games?
I play bridge.
There is bridge on Twitch. I broadcast bridge on Twitch, and I think I was at a Future Freedom Foundation event when I told you about Bridge Base Online, that you can play online. Have you been playing bridge online?
You told me about Bridge Base Online?
I did.
I hate you. I absolutely hate you. Do you know how much money I have fed to Bridge Base Online?
Oh, my bad. I told you about it at a Future Freedom Foundation event at George Mason years ago.
That is really funny. I love Bridge Base Online. I am totally addicted to Bridge Base Online. And of course, I was playing there a lot even before the shutdown. I mean, the shutdown has really altered the bridge world big time, because it's really sad, because most of the bridge players are retired people. And this is what how a lot of retired people, seniors, were living their lives. I know bridge players who are playing 6 days a week and loving it. I mean, I love bridge. I absolutely love it. But, I don't play 6 days a week. I play once, maybe twice. But with Bridge Base, it's fascinating. You can play online with robots or with partners. And for the first time last week, one of the local bridge clubs had the club play online against the other members of the club. So yeah, you have cursed my life, my friend.
Switching back to the campaign, what are your campaign's target demographics? Would your outreach lean conservative, liberal, or some other direction?
Oh, it definitely would not target conservatives. I'm going after conservatives. I think conservatism is a morally bankrupt philosophy. And I think it is just as responsible for the destruction of liberty and our well-being in this country as progressivism. They're all alike. To me, this is one political party, the Welfare Warfare Party. And it's divided into two wings, the conservative wing and the liberal wing, liberal in the pejorative sense of the word. That they're just fighting over musical chairs. Who is going to get the presidency, who's going to get all the largesse, and so forth. So I definitely wouldn't target them, and I wouldn't target progressivism either. Now, obviously, some conservatives might like my position on free market economics, Austrian economics, and so forth. But when they look at my other positions against the national security state, foreign interventionism, my hunch is that most conservatives are going to say we're sticking with the Republicans. Same with the Democrats and the progressives. They would like my position against foreign interventionism, the foreign empire, the national security state, the CIA, the NSA. Essentially positions that Bernie Sanders used to take, the hardcore positions before he decided that he had a chance to win and started watering down his foreign policy positions. But I think when the progressive movement sees where I stand on abolishing their social welfare programs, they would say, So the demographics I would target are, number one, people who are disaffected with the whole system. And look how many people don't vote. I mean, there's a reason they don't vote. I think that's very encouraging. You know, that the statists get all upset when people don't vote. I love it because those are people that are seeing through the tripe, and they're saying, what difference does it make whether you vote for a Democrat or Republican? Why should I vote for the lesser of two evils? They're seeing that. I would go after them. I would go after disaffected voters that are just, they know that this is a crooked, corrupt system, and they've been voting for the lesser of two evils, but they've been holding their nose in the process. I would say, take a look at my campaign. See how we want to move America in a better, freer, more prosperous, peaceful, harmonious direction. I target African Americans. I don't think Biden has the African American vote locked up at all. And I would be talking about this evil, immoral, destructive, racially bigoted drug war. Again, that Michelle Alexander, the noted academician, called the new Jim Crow. I would target Hispanic Americans over how the government's treated the border issues, essentially saying that we don't like Hispanics. We think y'all are unsavory people. I mean, why not just open the borders to the free movements of people? That's what's consistent with a free society. Why try to keep out people? I mean, when the Statue of Liberty says, send us your homeless, you're poor, you're destitute, you're masses yearning to breathe free, we're talking about the people that Democrats and Republicans consider are not very savory people. I love these people. I say, bring them in. I mean, or let them come in freely. This is our heritage. Open immigration was our heritage as Americans. And so I would be targeting Hispanic Americans and making the case to them why open borders, free trade, and open immigration is the only way to go. Target young people. Now, young people are a fascinating demographic. And when I say young people, I'm talking 55 and below. I should say maybe younger people. That because they're all convinced that they're bad people, that they need to be forced to care for their parents with Social Security, with Medicare, that they need to be forced to care for the poor with farm subsidies, education grants, and so forth. This is pure nonsense. This is a self-esteem issue. This is what I'm saying is you could abolish these programs today. And now all these younger people are no longer having to pay withholding tax. That $2 trillion that's being used to fund Social Security and Medicare is now in their pockets. And I have no doubts that everything would be fine. You know, people say, oh, Jacob, there'd be people dying in the streets. Seniors would be dying of cancer in the gutters. This is pure nonsense. It shows you a lack of faith in freedom. That you could abolish these programs today and young people will step up to the plate. A lot of seniors don't even need the money. I mean, they're sufficiently wealthy, but younger people would step up to the plate on the truly destitute. Even if it's not their parents, you'd have charitable organizations people would be donating to, helping out people that are truly needy. We need to recapture this faith. And that's what I would be going to younger people saying, join up with us to restore a really free society. Don't phase out these programs over the next 40 years. Go for freedom now. I believe in you. You've got to start believing in yourselves. You got to believe in your compatriots, whether Generation X or Generation Y or whatever generation you're in. Believe in yourselves. Believe in freedom. Believe in God. Believe in voluntary charity. Those are my demographics.
So, as president, what is the proper constitutional role of executive orders, and what would you accomplish with executive orders?
I think executive orders are a constitutional abomination. I mean, they're no different from dictatorial rule. I think everything should go through Congress. And you can see this going on today with all these little mini dictators, mayors, governors. They're just issuing these lockdown orders, mandates, without going to their legislature, without going to their city council. The dictatorial DNA in these people is manifesting itself big time. Remember Lord Acton's dictum. Power tends to corrupt and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. We're seeing it big time now. That I think the whole concept of executive order should be abolished. Now, I would rescind all those executive orders, which obviously takes an executive order to rescind them, but I think that's different. That's just canceling out all these things that they've done. If a president wants to do something, he should be required to go to the elected representatives of the American people and secure permission to do that.
How would you handle climate change?
Okay, tough issue. I mean, because we're dealing here with externalities here, and I confess I don't know what the real accurate answer on climate change. I've looked at some of the studies, but I'm not a scientist. I don't have. I'm a lawyer by training, and I'm a think tank educator, educational foundation. I I can't decipher who is right and who is wrong, but to me it doesn't matter because I don't want the government handling this anyway. I mean, the government is the great destroyer. I mean, look at all the things they've done to destroy people in the Middle East and Afghanistan and other parts of the world, like the drug war, the immigration controls. I mean, these people destroy things. The idea that we're going to put the climate in charge of the government is just laughable. Now, I've done considerable hiking in my life. I'm a cyclist. I mean, I love, the environment. I love, the idea of clean water and so forth. But the solution here lies with the private sector. You have polluted waters, privatize the waters, put them in private hands. I guarantee you, private owners will clean things up immediately because it's in their interest. I told you I grew up in South Texas. South Texas ranchers are the greatest guardians of their property. They have beautiful ranches. And when an oil company signs a lease with them, man, they make sure that in that lease, the oil company has to leave everything pristine and so forth, because that's what private ownership does. It encourages the private owner to take care of things. And that's how things would work in the environment. Now, are there cases where you have externalities like air pollution or the pollution of somebody else's waterway indirectly upstream or whatever? Absolutely. I say that's what courts are for. That's what we have a judiciary for. Let people sue under traditional legal theories like nuisance or trespass that enables a court to weigh the circumstances, weigh the evidence, balance the interests here, and render a proper judgment, as compared to putting the whole thing in the hands of this bureaucratic, dictatorial, tyrannical agency known as the Environmental Protection Agency that has destroyed so many people's lives and has destroyed so much liberty in our land. Get rid of the bureaucrats and let's use the judiciary for what it was meant to do.
So the President of the United States gets to appoint judges to the Supreme Court, the circuit courts, and the federal district courts. What kind of judges would you appoint if you were elected president? And do you have a short list for the U.S. Supreme Court?
I wouldn't hesitate. I mean, libertarian judges, libertarian lawyers. I mean, that would be a no-brainer for me. I mean, we've had enough of these Democrats and Republicans up there. We need libertarian lawyers to get in there and who are going to strictly interpret the Constitution, not none of this breathing document and living document, and ignore things like the Declaration of War requirement, which both Democrats and Republican lawyers ignore, especially when they become judges. A libertarian lawyer would enforce the Constitution because a libertarian lawyer is thinking about liberty. I mean, that's the ultimate aim of this society. When the convention delegates came out of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, they brought into existence this Constitution, and it was designed to be a government of limited enumerated powers, and everybody understood that. I mean, that they'd gone into this convention as with the mission of amending the Articles of Confederation, which the United States have been operating under for more than 10 years. Under the Articles, the federal government didn't even have the power to tax. Imagine, a federal government didn't have the power to tax for more than 10 years, and it stayed in existence. Well, they were going to amend the Articles, but instead they come out with this charter. And so it's a limited government republic they bring into existence. And to make sure everybody got the point, our American ancestors demanded 10 amendments that said, we want to make it clear you don't have the powers to destroy our freedom of religion, freedom of the press, petitioning, speech, gun rights. And if you target us, you have to follow due process, trial by jury, and so forth, because they knew that federal officials would do these kind of things. A libertarian lawyer understands all this. Democrat lawyers don't understand this. Republican lawyers don't understand, or they don't care. And they think that whatever the majority rules, that's it. Well, the whole idea was to protect us against the rule of the majority. That's the whole idea of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We don't let the majority decide what we're going to read and write and speak and so forth. So without a doubt, I would do libertarian lawyers. Short list for the Supreme Court. I mean, I'd have to give it some thought, but I mean, people that come to mind are Randy Barnett, David D'Amato, a lawyer from Chicago, Richard Epstein, brilliant libertarian lawyer, Andrew Napolitano, brilliant libertarian lawyer, works for Fox News. I used to be a judge. Those are the ones that immediately come to mind, but I will guarantee you this is now a big movement. There are libertarian lawyers all across this country, and those are the only ones I would consider. I would never consider a statist Democrat, Republican lawyer for a Supreme Court justice or any federal judgeship. My first choice. Now, there may not be enough libertarian lawyers at the federal district court level. I don't know, but that would be my preference. And then at some point, you have to move over to the statists and appoint them if you run out of libertarian lawyers.
How would you handle the debt crisis?
Well, I already indicated that you enforce the debt ceiling immediately, as soon as it comes due. You do not let Congress surpass that debt ceiling. And that means that the government is prohibited from borrowing any more money. And so that means all the so-called non-essential functions. Now, their definition of non-essential is different from mine. My definition is going to be much more expansive. Everybody goes home, and they're not going to get back pay. And I would encourage them to resign and get jobs in the private sector, because this thing's going to last a long time. Because I guarantee you, Congress is going to sit there thinking that I would cave. I wouldn't cave. And so you finally get to a point where there is no more new debt. Congress would finally get the point, and you'd be saving gobs of money, because a lot of these people would be starting to move into the private sector when they realize that a libertarian president wasn't going to cave. That things are going to just new situation in town, and then you start getting the American people to think about what should be the essential functions of government. And this is what I would do in the campaign. I mean, if I were to win this nomination, there's two questions I would love to see every American family discussing and debating every night over dinner. Okay. Number one, what does it mean to be free? What does that really mean? I mean, we all talk about freedom. A lot of Americans think they're free. Libertarians know we're not free. Okay. Let's discuss and debate what it means to be free. What does that term mean? Number two, what is the role of government, the legitimate role of government in a free society? What should government be doing? What it should not be doing? And so once people start thinking at that level, and this is pretty much the level where people were thinking when they crafted the Bill of Rights. Remember that the founders, our ancestors that put together this country, they were no more smarter than the rest of us. They were just ordinary people, but they were thinking at a higher level. And this is what I would love to see the American people do. Think at a higher level. How can we improve on what they did? Now, they did some bad things. We know that there were some bad founding principles: slavery, tariffs, corrupt crony capitalism, and so forth. But they had some good founding principles. And that's what I would like Americans to do, to do some soul searching. How did we get off this road? Where did we start as a country? Because I think that if we can examine that question, we can get right back on the right track. People can figure out this is what we need to do. And once people figure out what should government not be doing, you're talking about a disintegration of most of what the federal government does, which obviously saves a lot of money and therefore not incurring any more massive new debt, including opposing the stimulus package. I mean, to me, it's just shocking that all these people, where are they getting this money? Did they have this $2 trillion, that's soon to be $6 trillion, hidden under their bed? I mean, we all know this is just a scam. They don't have this money. They were spending $1 trillion more than what they were bringing in, Chuck, before the crisis. And it's just shocking to me to see all these, well, not shocking, I guess, but it is somewhat surprising to see all these fiscally conservatives, fiscally responsible conservatives, and fiscally responsible libertarian-leaning conservatives that are all favoring the stimulus package. I mean, they're all in this together now. It's really funny. The conservatives, the libertarian-leaning conservatives, Nancy Pelosi, Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, they're all on the same page. And it's really ironic because they really are just one party anyway.
So we touched on this a little bit with the judges, but Republicans and Democrats have a large pool to tap to fill in the executive branch with appointees. How would you staff your departments? Do you have anyone in particular in mind for the cabinet level positions?
No. No. What for? Just these things don't deserve to exist. You see, that this is the thing, that a libertarian president is not interested in becoming a manager of the welfare state. I have no interest in doing that. I don't want a Department of Education, a Department of Energy, a Department of Labor, SEC, FEC, all these bureaucratic agencies that have come into existence under both Democrats and Republicans. Now, conservatives, Republicans used to be fairly good on some of these. Reagan abolished the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, Commerce, and so forth. But they have caved. They have become no different from Democrats and Republicans. So we don't want to staff these departments. I want to abolish these programs. I wanted to abolish the taxes that fund these programs. I want to restore sovereignty to the American people, where they, again, keep everything they earn. They decide. You don't need the federal government involved in education. You don't need government involved in education at all. There's another example of where we can establish freedom in this country, a separation of education in the state at all levels of government. And this is one of the differences between me and some of my opponents in this race, is that they say, well, leave education to the local governments. I say leave education to the free market at all levels of government. So I would not hope to staff any of these bureaucratic central planning agencies that don't deserve to exist. They're highly destructive. Get rid of them.
If you receive the Libertarian Party nomination, do you have a preference for your running mate, your vice presidential candidate? And do you have a short list?
Well, I think it's just too presumptuous right now to talk about that. I mean, this is a hard-fought race, and it's getting scrambled big time now. I think that this is a race that anybody can win at this point. I mean, we're fighting like we're at the bottom, and when you're fighting to win the race, it's just not the right time to start speculating about who your vice presidential candidate should be and so forth, because to me, it's just putting the cart before the horse. Now, if it gets to a point where it looks like, hey, man, we got a really good shot at winning this thing, and the convention's right around the corner, then I think then we go public and talk to people and say, hey, this is what we're thinking and so forth. But I think those kind of thoughts would be best left just on a private basis at this point.
So conversely, if you lost the Libertarian Party nomination for president, would you be willing to run for vice president?
No.
Which former president of the United States did you admire the most, and why? George Washington. I loved his position on setting forth what America stands for and what America needed to do to retain this unique position in the world. When he said no entangling alliances with other nations, no making friends, overly becoming friends with a particular regime, allying yourself with regimes. Don't have overheated animosity toward other regimes like we see with Russia and China that's going on, compliments of the U.S. national security state. I think Washington really had this beautiful vision as to what America stood for and what it should stand for. And the fact that he was willing to leave office within 2 terms was just remarkable. I mean, he could have easily been a dictator. Americans would have kept him in office till he died. And he set that precedent, saying this is not a good idea to vest one person with a lot of power, as contrary to like what Franklin Roosevelt did. I think Madison, I love Madison because, I mean, this was the father of the Constitution. I mean, this is the guy that crafted this thing. The guy was brilliant, and he saw the wisdom of limited government, of constitutionally limited government, and what that means. Now, some of these guys do some bad things in office. I mean, there's no question about that. And they have some pretty unsavory backgrounds, like owning slaves and so forth. Thomas Jefferson, I deeply admire, but particularly for his Declaration of Independence. I mean, Jefferson just shook the entire world with those principles. The real significance of the American Revolution was not that the British
colonists beat their own government, the British Empire. The real significance of the American Revolution for me is Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. I mean, those words continue to shake the world, that all men have been created, have been endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and to secure these rights, not destroy them, not regulate them, not infringe upon them, governments are instituted among men. And if government becomes destructive of these rights, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish government. I mean, those words upended the traditional relationship where kings and other governments said, we control you, we're in charge of you. Jefferson comes along and says, these are not privileges. We control you. You are our servants. We call you into existence, and we can get rid of you whenever we want. So I would put those three people at the top of my list: Madison, Jefferson, and Washington.
So you earlier you said that in your youth you admired John F. Kennedy, and that later you had your libertarian revelation. So did you look back at John F. Kennedy's policies and decide you didn't like them as much after that revelation, or how did your thinking evolve on that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That before I discovered libertarianism, I believed that government really did play an important role in helping the poor. I couldn't understand why people would object to government helping the poor. You see, in my mind, that had been indoctrinated in America's public schools, I thought that government was just like an actor in the marketplace, just like Microsoft or any other business, that the government was just another participant in the marketplace. So I thought, well, why shouldn't government help the poor? It's his money. I mean, why shouldn't the government be able to do what it wants with its money, just like Microsoft does with its money? Well, then I discovered libertarianism, and I thought, wow, the only place government gets its money is with taxes. I mean, it forcibly takes its money from people. This was a great big revelation for me. And so that's when I realized that this notion of government helping people, which of course John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson stood for, and Franklin Roosevelt and Democrats, and later Republicans and conservatives and them today, they all support this notion of taking money by force from one group of people and giving it to another group of people in the name of care and compassion was pure nonsense. I mean, there is no care and compassion in this process. The IRS is not a caring and compassionate entity. It is one of the most tyrannical, vicious agencies in our history. I mean, just ask anybody who's been the victim of the IRS: audits, liens, foreclosures, harassment, abuse, and they don't have to follow any due process to do all these things. They just go out and start seizing people's assets. This is what Democrats and Republicans call care and compassion. So I realized at that point that I had to reevaluate everything I had understood about the role of government in a free society, that a genuinely free society is based on voluntary charity. And it's the only society where charity has any meaning to it. When you help out another person, whether it's your parents who are on their deathbed or sick, or help out a needy person, this brings meaning to your life because it's based on choice. You have a right to say yes or no, and then you make that choice in accordance with the dictates of your conscience, which is constantly working with what we call the welfare state. The conscience doesn't work. It's just the IRS and it's the Social Security Administration or the Medicare Administration that do all these things. Now, the way I figured this all out, though, this was that as a prelude to my discovery of libertarianism. I was representing illegal immigrants as a lawyer. When I got back to Laredo to practice law, I went to the federal judge, who I had known as a kid. He was a lawyer, and of course my dad was a lawyer, so I knew the federal judge, and I made an appointment to go visit him. And I said, Judge, I'd like you to appoint me to represent illegal immigrants. I think this is a crooked, corrupt system that we've got here of immigration controls. I want to challenge the constitutionality of it. I think it's very unequally enforced. And that's my constitutional challenge that I want to bring up in your court, and then take it up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and if necessary, the U.S. Supreme Court. And he says, fine. So he appointed me to represent illegal immigrants that were here, that had been arrested, illegal entry. So I was at a detention center waiting for a client, and I saw all these guys milling around. This was before I discovered libertarianism, and I was still a liberal, in the Lyndon Johnson, John Kennedy mold. And all of a sudden it hit me. They're all walking around. They got khakis, T-shirts. It was hot in Laredo. And it just hit me. It dawned on me. If Democrats love the poor so much, why are they treating these people like this? I mean, these people, all they want to do is work. Well, why are they here in jail? So I went and asked it, and I was struggling with it. I went over and asked a couple of my liberal friends, one of them who was on the legal aid board with me, lawyer. And I said, hey, man, how do you reconcile this, what Democrats are doing to these people? And he says, oh, well, the law is the law. And this is what they all said. All my liberal friends said, the law is the law. Well, that wasn't good enough for me. I mean, segregation was the law, slavery was the law. And so I struggled and I couldn't figure out how to reconcile this. And then I discovered libertarianism, and I realized libertarianism stands for open borders. I said, that's beautiful. And they stand for voluntary charity. That's beautiful. Everything came together for me. And so, now Johnson, I don't have much respect for at all. I mean, Johnson to me is just one of the worst presidents this country could ever hope to have. John Kennedy, I have a high admiration for. And not because of his leftist views, obviously, but he came into power as a standard Cold War advocate. He had fallen for this whole thing that I call a Cold War scam, that the communists were coming to get us, that Cuba was a dagger pointed at America's throat, that if we don't stop them in North Korea, that they'll come in, the dominoes will fall in Vietnam and so forth. But what was fascinating about Kennedy was that after the Cuban Missile Crisis, he achieved a breakthrough. The same kind of breakthrough that libertarians achieved with respect to libertarianism, but he achieved it with respect to the national security state and this Cold War that he figured out was just a crock. And so he decided to bring it to an end. I mean, it was a dramatic change. He goes before the American University without even telling the CIA, who he was in a war with, and the national security establishment he was in a war with. He doesn't tell them anything about what he's going to do. And he gives this beautiful speech. It's online. You can see it, where it's called The Peace Speech by John Kennedy, where he says, we can live in peaceful coexistence with the Soviet Union, with Red China, with the communist world. We don't need this Cold War, just a racket. And he says, I'm decreeing an end to it right here. And it shocked the world. It shocked the Soviet Union. The speech was broadcast all over the Soviet Union, the first time that had ever been done. And so this was a man that obviously was in front of the curve. The national security establishment hated him. They said that he was a threat to national security because of all this. He didn't understand the communist threat, that he was naive. And I admire the heck out of this guy for having the courage to stand up to the entire national security state and say, this is a crock and we're going to bring it to an end. No president ever since has had the courage to do that.
Do you have any endorsements that you're proud of and want to highlight?
Nope.
Okay.
I mean, it's just because I don't have any endorsements. I mean, I always vote libertarian. Maybe it's because people haven't wanted my endorsement. They haven't asked me for it. But I mean, look, Ron Paul is one of my heroes. I worked hard for him in the 2012 race. So there wasn't a formal endorsement because he never asked my endorsement. He didn't need my endorsement. But I deeply admire. He's one of the...
I mean, people have endorsed your presidential campaign. People have endorsed you, not people you endorse.
Oh, people who endorsed me. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. People have endorsed me. No, I mean, it's just, people that I don't really think of it in terms of endorsing me, I guess. I think of it more in terms of the message I'm delivering. I think that's what's been so friggin' exciting and gratifying and rewarding in this race, that I got in this race saying, this is what I want to do. I want to run a campaign purely based on libertarian principles. That's what I want to do. And I wasn't optimistic. I mean, I know the Libertarian Party has been dominated by a lot of the reform crowd. Let's reform Social Security, let's reform this, and let's reform that. And I'm here saying, let's dismantle these things, because freedom means dismantling slavery. It means dismantling the structure of serfdom so that you end up with a free society with no infringements on liberty. So I realized I got a big uphill fight here. I mean, I'm trying to attract the people that say, yeah, Jacob, let's run this thing as a pure libertarian campaign. No Republican light, no Democrat light, and so forth. And so it's been a really nice surprise, but it's not me. I mean, I know people are not supporting me because I'm any great person. It's this message that's resonating. I'm touching people's chords in this party. And I notice, Chuck, sometimes when I give the speech of let's run this thing purely libertarians, no school vouchers, no health savings accounts. Let's have a freedom campaign here. I mean, there's eyes in the newbies in the party that are as wide as saucers. They're shocked. They've never heard this message before, but I can tell I'm touching chords. And so when I'm winning these straw polls and I'm winning, primaries and caucuses, I never think about it in terms of me as a person. I'm thinking about it's this philosophy that libertarianism, the most beautiful philosophy, I think, in history, is resonating among LP members. That's what's exciting to me.
So, of the prior Libertarian Party presidential campaigns, which most closely resembles the campaign you want to run?
I think Harry Brown's. I mean, okay, Harry Brown and I got in a battle, but I had the utmost respect and admiration for all his works. I mean, we were friends before the fight. I mean, it's one of the unfortunate things about politics is that you get in these stupid fights sometimes, and it just irreparably damages relations that were okay before you got into politics. This is one of the reasons I left politics many years ago. It's just it's a nasty business. But Brown, I bought all of Brown's books when I first discovered libertarianism. When I discovered libertarianism, I also discovered what was called the hard money movement. And so I went to this great convention in New Orleans put on by the National Center for Monetary Reform in 1979. I saw Ayn Rand give her last public speech before she passed away. And I had all of Brown's books. I read them all thoroughly. I got Harry Brown's special reports. I still have the big Brown notebook that he would send out where you could put all his special reports in there. And when he ran his campaign in 1996, man, I was excited. I mean, because Brown, here's the irony that I used to vote in the early days, as a Democrat and so forth. And then I read Brown's book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. Brown was the reason I stopped voting. I mean, it's like, okay, it makes sense. Why vote for the lesser of two evils here? And I wasn't even thinking of the LP at this point. Well, when Brown runs in 96, he says, I'm now voting, and he makes the case as to why he's voting, because you can vote libertarian. And I think, wow, that makes total sense to me. So Brown influenced me to start voting again. So I always vote libertarian. I mean, to me, you vote libertarian, even though the Libertarian Party candidate may not be that, you might be running a Republican light campaign, which you kind of have to hold your nose on sometimes. But I figure that getting the vote totals up for the Libertarians is a powerful message to Democrats and Republicans. And so, yeah, I vote Libertarian.
Great. So hold on.
What was your question?
I got distracted.
Not sure I answered. Yeah, I'm not sure I answered your question. Now, what was your question again?
I'd asked which of the prior Libertarian Party presidential campaigns most closely resembles the campaign you went on, and you said Harry Brown. Yeah, Brown ran a very principled campaign. I think the most principled campaign in LP history, and I think that serves as a model for everybody else after that. Next question. What are a few of your favorite libertarian books, apart from the ones you've written yourself? I was not going to mention my own in answer to that question. You didn't need to put that qualifier in there. Okay. All of Ludwig von Mises's works. I mean, Mises to me is heroic. I mean, it's just the principal case for libertarian economics. Mises is a giant. There's no question that Mises is the greatest economist who's ever lived. And so he's right at the top of my list. To a lesser extent, but to a great extent, Friedrich Hayek. Hayek watered down the message, especially in his book, The Constitution of Liberty, where he calls for a minimal welfare state. But still, Hayek's heroic with his concept of the spontaneous order, the denationalization of money, the role of the entrepreneur. Israel Kirzner, another Austrian economist, tremendous influence in my life on the importance of entrepreneurship. Frederick Bastiat, The Law, one of my favorites.
Economic Policy by Ludwig von Mises is another one of my favorites. Atlas Shrugged was a transformative book in my life. In fact, my earliest exposure to libertarianism before I discovered those 4 little books was I saw the movie The Fountainhead on television while I was waiting tables. After I got out of infantry school, I went to Dallas and waited tables for a couple of months before resuming law school. And I saw The Fountainhead on an afternoon movie between, I was waiting tables, lunch and dinner, and it just bowled me over. I mean, and then of course later on, after I discovered libertarianism, I discovered Atlas Shrugged. Murray Rothbard has been a big influence, although I've never been attracted to the anarchist paradigm, the anarcho-capitalist paradigm. I've always been an advocate of limited government. Leonard Read was the man who changed the course of my life. And when I went to Fee to work as program director, I got an article published in the Freeman, which is their monthly journal, called Leonard Read Changed My Life. And he really did. He's the catalyst that changed everything about my life. His books were so clear and so succinct and so profound. I mean, he would write in this little simple way that almost the reader thinks he's talking directly to you. It's so phenomenal, his style of writing. So those are the giants that come to mind. I'm sure there's others. Let me look at my bookshelf here. F.A. Harper, Baldy Harper, loved his works. All the Austrian school, Menger, Bombewerk. I think those are the majors, though. Yeah.
So why do you think you are the best candidate to represent the Libertarian brand who's running for the nomination this year?
Well, I think all the people that have been in the race up to, that have participated in all these debates, I think we all are qualified for this debate. I wouldn't say that I'm any better than anybody else in this race. I mean, one thing I've learned in these debates, and not all the candidates, we got new candidates coming in that have not participated in these debates. So they haven't been tested in the crucible of debate, but there's a bunch of us that have. We have not shown any reluctance or any fear of coming in and participating in these debates. And let me tell you something about these debates, Chuck. People like them, that every convention wants to have them, but they are not easy things for the participants. I mean, they are high-pressured events. Your views are being tested by the moderator, by your opponents, by delegates, by LP members. You're getting challenged. When the moderator asks somebody else a question on the stage, you can take the time to figure out what your answer is going to be. But if you're asked the question, these are tough things to right on the spot to answer the question. So I have the utmost respect for everybody that's been in this race. We've developed a camaraderie. We've had our fights and our disagreements and stuff, but we've developed a camaraderie among ourselves. Those of us that were not fearful of coming in early and getting these debates. I've participated in 9. Some of my opponents have participated in even more. But I'm talking to people like Mark Whitney, Adam Kokesh, Joe Jorgensen, Sam Robb, Max Abramson, Armstrong. Who else? I know I'm missing somebody big in there. But Vermin Supreme. Okay. We all have been willing to come and have our views tested and challenged and so forth. I would say I'm no better candidate than any of these. I think that every one of us would make a better president than Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I have no doubts about that. America would be better off with any of us in this race. And I think LP members would agree. They've seen us in the heat of battle in these debates, being tested and having our views tested and so forth. Now, I bring a different perspective, though, that if LP members think that this perspective is good, then they'll say, hey, Jacob, we're going to make you the nominee. My perspective is 100% pure libertarian principles. Let's fight this campaign. Like I said earlier, I believe our principles are our greatest asset. No conservatism at all. No progressivism at all. Now, I've been accused by a new entrant in the race that, Jacob, you're too radical. Well, what he's really doing is indicting libertarianism, because all my views are just libertarian. I mean, nobody disputes that. Everybody that's been in this race so far, that's been in these debates, we all agree with the basic libertarian principles. And we may differ here on patents and copyrights or Social Security or whatever, but we're all basically on the same page. The others who might come in this race that are libertarian-leaning conservatives, they're in a whole different ballgame here. They have avoided libertarian debates. They not wanted to go through the crucible of those debates, and their philosophy is different. But am I better than somebody else? No, I don't think so. I think it's just a different emphasis. What do libertarian parties want? Do they want this standard reform Republican light campaign? If they do, I'm not your guy. If they want a pure libertarian campaign that's going to use libertarian principles as our assets, our swords, as we go into this battle against Democrats and Republicans, then I'm your guy.
Have you spoken with policy experts at libertarian think tanks about various policy areas? And do you have policy experts advising your campaign?
I have no experts advising my campaign. I mean, I know what my philosophy is. I don't need anybody advising me on my philosophy and my position. Now, there may come a time if I were to get this nomination with respect to things like foreign policy, I might ask somebody's viewpoint on exactly what's happening in Yemen. I mean, I think in terms of the big picture, ending foreign interventionism, like John Quincy Adams' speech in Search of Monsters to Destroy. I think in those kind of terms, end America's role as the slayer of monsters around the world, or the federal government's role. But I don't know the details. My mind doesn't steep itself in all the fine details of like what's going on in Yemen. I know the U.S. is cooperating in the killing and the destruction that's going on there. But I might at some point, reach out to somebody who's an expert in this. Hey, brief me a little bit on the details of what's going on in Yemen. But in terms of my overall philosophy, yeah, I have friends in all the think tanks. I mean, we all get along. The Cato Institute, Reason Magazine, Independent Institute, Mises Institute, FEE, and then all the state think tanks. I mean, we all know each other and so forth. But I'm very comfortable with my libertarian philosophy. I know who I am. I'm a libertarian. And I feel very comfortable defending our philosophy to the American people. That's why I want this nomination. I want libertarians and LP members to be able to go to sleep well at night, thinking Jacob's not going to embarrass us with some bad exposition of libertarianism. That he's going to be out there telling people what we're fighting for, why we're fighting, why we devoted our lives to this cause, why we go to the state conventions, why we donate to the party, why we donate to the movement. That's what I want in this campaign.
So if you receive the nomination, will you campaign full-time for the general election, or are you going to be juggling with your think tank or other work responsibilities?
It depends. With this coronavirus thing, it's just so hard to call. And my campaign manager, Jake Porter, and I have been talking a lot about, well, what happens if we do win this nomination? What do we do? Because ordinarily, you'd look for places to go give speeches. I mean, I love giving speeches and talking about libertarianism. And and not just to libertarians. I want to reach out to regular Americans and non-libertarians and say, this is what we're fighting for. Join up with us. Yeah, we're third party. We're small, but by golly, join up with us because we got the answer to how to get this country out of this mess. But we don't know how things are going to develop. It may be like primarily an online campaign, which we're already doing right now. I mean, we have reoriented. We didn't skip a beat. So if it's an online thing, we're already thinking of ways, how do we do that? Well, I'm president of FFF. I'm managing FFF right now, and I'm doing both. I mean, I'm burning the midnight oil. I'm working weekends to do both. If it comes to a point, and if I were to get this nomination where my work with FFF has to diminish, I feel comfortable with that. I've got a vice president, excellent vice president, who can easily manage it. I've got a director of donor affairs that can easily take over the office management. Both of them have worked with me for more than 25 years. I'm very comfortable putting the hands of the foundation in their control. And so I just have to see if it's, but my primary priority is going to be the campaign, absolutely. And that if I have to diminish my role in FFF, at the same time, I will do that. If I don't, then I won't. So that's my plan.
Will you be campaigning and supporting down-ticket libertarian candidates if you receive the nomination?
Probably not. I mean, what I want to do is run a really dynamic, exciting race for president, where Americans are talking about it and saying, "Hey, this guy's different, man. He's talking different. He's talking about new systems for America, systems that are based on genuine freedom principles and free market principles." And hopefully, I'd have a vice presidential candidate that's thinking the same way, where we're exciting people to come and look at the libertarians. I think that's the best way you can help the down ticket libertarians. Let's face it, like it or not, I know there's a lot of people that spend in the party that spend their time building the structure of the party, the foundation of the party at the local level, at the county level, which is great. I mean, I totally agree with that. You can never run a successful presidential race without having that foundation. And what these people have done is phenomenal. I mean, when I got back in the party a couple of years ago, I was shocked to learn that there were county parties. I mean, lots of county parties. I mean, when I was around, I mean, they were lucky to have a state party, you know what? Not lucky to have a state party. Everybody had state parties. But I mean, to have like large numbers of people in the state party, and now they have county parties. So, yeah, I think that's the way you help the down ticket people, by running a very active, dynamic, attractive, exciting presidential race that's based on principles. And then I think if you attract attention that way, people say, "Oh, let me look at other libertarians that are running." And I think that's the greatest thing a presidential candidate can do for the down ticket libertarians.
Will you remain in the Libertarian Party far into the future, whether you win or lose the nomination?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have no reason to leave now. I mean, I look, when I was doing stuff for the party back in the 90s, I loved it. I mean, I loved the Libertarian Party. Like I say, I served 3 terms on the platform committee. I mean, I was going to state conventions like on a monthly basis. I don't know how many times I was speaking, but I think it was like 7 or 8 conventions a year. I was the keynote speaker at the 96 convention. I loved being in the party. Leaving the party in 2002 was a very difficult decision, because I knew that I loved the party, but it had gotten to a point where I knew I just could not be constructive. There was just too much negative energy, a lot of animosity. And I said, I need to go where everything's positive, and that's devote all my life in the educational arena. And that's what I did for the next 18 years. There were my critics, my opponents in that fight said, "We're spreading rumors that Jacob badmouths the party." That's absolutely false. I never badmouthed the party. That people will look in vain for any article or any talk or any speech or any conversation where I ever badmouth the party, because I love the party. I gave a lot of my life to the party in those years. And so now that I've come back, I'm having the time of my life. I plan to stay indefinitely.
So I've kind of exhausted my questions, but I have a few questions from the chat here.
Okay.
First of all, what do you think? Do you have a long-term plan for the Libertarian Party to become a significant national player in U.S. politics? What goals should the party have for this year, for future elections? What would be a success in 2020?
I have maintained since the very beginning, when I first joined the party and I was on the platform committee, that the goal of this party, we should never lose sight of the goal of the party, the ultimate goal. And that goal is the achievement of a free society. Okay, that's been the goal from the very beginning, when it was established or conceived in David Nolan's living room, 1971. The achievement of a free society. So we get people into public office. I mean, it's a political organization, no question about that. But we should always keep in mind that the purpose that we want to get people into office is so that they can help us achieve the free society. We don't want to get people in public office just for the sake of getting people in public office. I mean, we're a political party, but if you get nothing but, let's say, Republicans or Democrats in power under the name libertarian, what have you accomplished? I mean, like, let's say that we get Jeb Bush and Mitt Romney to come into our party and be the presidential candidate and the vice presidential candidate. I mean, these are famous people, and they could win the presidency, and they could bring notoriety and money. They would bring jillions of dollars to the Libertarian Party. And let's say they get elected. Who cares? So what? Well, what does it mean? It means nothing. Nothing at all. I've always said that we have to maintain our principles. Are we a radical philosophy? You bet we're a radical philosophy, but we need to embrace that radicalism. We need to be who we are. We are not Jeb Bush. We are not Bernie Sanders or whatever. We are libertarians. We have to be ourselves. And I think that's our best chance for electoral success. You go out and you tell people, look, I'm a libertarian. What does that mean? Here's what it means. This is what I stand for. Gosh, Jacob, that's pretty radical. Yes, it is radical. But this is the way we get out of these messes the Democrats and Republicans have foisted upon our land. So the voter says, okay, Jacob, I've looked over your party platform. I've looked over your positions. It's just not for me. Okay, that's okay. Nobody's guaranteed success in life. But what I object to is libertarians that say, wait, Jacob, that's not okay. We have to win that person's vote. Let's start watering down our principles. Let's become Republican lights to win that vote. Let's start calling for health savings accounts and vouchers and all this reform stuff. And then all of a sudden you go to the voter and say, hey, look, we're calling for reform of these things. We're not calling for ending them anymore. Oh, that's fine. I'll vote for you libertarians now. What good does it do? You get elected to public office, you're stuck now. You can't backtrack. You can't say, well, okay, I'll fake y'all out. I really am here to achieve a free society, which means getting rid of these programs, because you'll be out in your next election. They'll consider you a fraud. So our best shot at achieving our goal is to stick with principles, even if that means you don't get any votes. I mean, I get more excited about a libertarian candidate that hews strictly to principle and gets 1% of the vote than one that goes out and runs a Republican-like campaign and gets 10% of the vote. I will stick with the guy that's getting the 1% every day of the week because he's doing what we need to do. The only way we were ever going to achieve a free society is by adhering to principle. No guarantees, but how else can people think about freedom if libertarians are not going to talk about freedom?
So there were a few people in the chat that had some questions about healthcare, and I'll ask you to respond to the one point here. A chatter pointed out that Martin Shkreli raised the price of the toxoplasmosis medication Daraprim by 50 times. So are you concerned that when the government regulates less, that people will jack up their prices, price gouge people, and that people might get worse healthcare as a result if they're unable to afford it?
Okay, let me make something real clear here. I do not favor less regulation. I want to make that real clear. All right, I favor no regulation. Okay, this is the distinction between libertarianism and conservatism. Conservatisms favor less regulation. Libertarians favor liberty, a total separation of healthcare in the state, separation of economy in the state, separation of money in the state, where there is no regulation. Think church and state. The government doesn't regulate churches. We don't call for less regulation of churches. We call for no regulation of churches. That's what I want in healthcare, economy, money, immigration, and so forth. Now, remember that all the crisis that we're suffering under today is because you have this statist healthcare system. Let me put things in perspective. Okay, let me go back to when I was growing up as a kid, because it'll give you a good idea of what a free market healthcare system was. Wasn't a perfect healthcare system. You had medical licensure, which libertarians oppose. The best piece on this is Milton Friedman, the Libertarian Nobel Prize winning economist, in his book, Capitalism and Freedom. He's got a chapter called Medical Licensure. It's on the website of the Future of Freedom Foundation. You can Google it there, which I again emphasize is not endorsing my campaign, but you can find the essay there. That when I was a kid, there was no Medicare and Medicaid. Okay, there was no government involvement in healthcare really at all. Minimal regulations, minimal controls, and so forth. Healthcare costs were so low that nobody needed major medical insurance. Now, notice people talk about, oh, well, what about pre-existing conditions, Jacob, on healthcare? Where do you stand on that? It's a non-issue. In a free market system, which is essentially the system that I was growing up in, nobody had a healthcare insurance, okay? Because they didn't need it. Why? because healthcare costs were so low, so minimal, so stable that nobody would even think of going to get healthcare insurance. It was like going to the grocery store. Okay, how many people have grocery store insurance today to protect against the soaring costs of groceries? Nobody. Because you go to the grocery store, you buy your groceries, and you pay your money, and that's it. That's what going to the doctors was like. Okay, that gives you a hint of what I'm talking about, where healthcare costs are so low that you don't even think about insurance. All right. Now, what about the poor? Remember, I grew up in Laredo, which the Census Bureau said was the poorest city in the United States. This is in the 1950s, early 60s. The doctor's offices in Laredo were filled with patients every day. And they knew that most of them, or at least many of them, could not pay. They were there without money. This was the poorest city in the United States. People were literally living in shacks. There were a lot of people coming over from Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, which was right across the river, going to Laredo doctors. There was never an instance where any doctor turned away any patient for inability to pay. Same thing with a local hospital. It was called Mercy Hospital. It was a Catholic hospital. They were handling cases for free. They relied on donations. Doctors were still the second wealthiest people in Laredo because they were making money off people who could pay. And the income taxation was very low at that time. You didn't have the massive welfare state that we have today. Doctors were the second wealthiest people in Laredo, second only to the oil people. All right, so then this gives you a hint of a free market healthcare system where prices are just low and stable. Nobody needs insurance. Medicare and Medicaid come into existence, and everything is ruined. Everything's destroyed at that point. This finest healthcare system in history. Doctors love what they did in life. They made house calls. There was innovations. There was improvements taking place on a phenomenal basis. It all comes crashing down with Medicare and Medicaid. That all of a sudden, this massive demand on the system that government poses starts causing healthcare costs to soar. And what else could be the result? I mean, you've got this artificial demand on this system that's now superimposed on this free market system. And healthcare costs start soaring. That's when the insurance now starts becoming necessary. Doctors start forming all these weird alliances, corporations, limited liability this and all this stuff. They start going to work for healthcare providers and all this. That was the end of America's healthcare system. Right there, Medicare and Medicaid. And then the worst part is making seniors believe that they're dependent on this, that they could never survive without it, making everybody think that most everybody think that they can't survive without this socialist narcotic. And so when we started FFF, and we published this book in 1994, The Dangers of Socialized Medicine, which you can get on Amazon today, we said there's only one fix for this. Forget trying to reform the system. I've been saying this for 30 years. It cannot be reformed. When that finally settles into people that, wow, Jacob is right. This system cannot be fixed. That's when people are finally going to say, we need a new system. And that's a free market system. And so I can't answer your questions about, oh, well, what about this drug going up or that drug? All I can tell you is that in a free market system, prices of healthcare, including medicines, are so low and stable that you don't need insurance any more than you need grocery store insurance. Now, let me just digress a minute and say that these anti-gouging laws are absolutely ludicrous and destructive. For one thing, in a free society, people have a right to charge whatever they want for what they own. That's what private ownership entails. You want to sell your house, you can set whatever price you want. People are free to say no if they want to. And the same thing on anything. You come up with a cure for cancer, it's your right to sell it forever you want. That's what private ownership, a society based on private ownership, is about. And also a price gouger in terms of emergencies like hurricanes or tornadoes. He is the greatest benefactor. He may look like the most evil, horrible person. And of course, Democrats and Republicans label them as such. He is a tremendous benefactor. There's a great essay in the Wall Street Journal of many years ago by an entrepreneur speculator named Victor Niederhofer. You can look it up. It's called the Speculator as Hero. Speculator is a great hero, and that's what a price gouger is. He's a speculator. He's buying things low, he's selling them high. He's allocating scarce resources. He's sending through the price system messages to consumers. Things are in scarce supply. You need to conserve. He's telling suppliers, entrepreneurs, hey, you can make a big profit here. come in and furnish bottled waters at this hurricane disaster zone, risk your life to get through the hurricane mess, and man, you'll make big money. That's what a price system is. It's just an information transmittal system that's telling people conserve, or you no longer need to conserve. Supplies are plentiful, or supply, we need more supplies here. These anti-gouging laws are the very worst thing that can ever happen to a society, especially in terms of a crisis.
Jacob, is there anything we haven't covered yet that you want to talk about?
I think you covered everything, Chuck. All I say is that if people want to learn more about my campaign, they want to support us, we need your support. Come to jacobforliberty.com, and I'd be honored and grateful for any donation that you can give us.
Well,
and we also have a volunteer page. Love to have you as volunteer as well.
Thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me for these almost 2 hours here. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to throw this up on YouTube, and I'll link it around. Hopefully some more delegates will get a chance to watch it. I'm going to be interviewing some other presidential candidates coming up. So right now I have booked Vermin Supreme tomorrow night, Adam Kokesh on April 28th, Arvin Vohra on May 5th, Joe Jorgensen on May 11th, and I'm hoping to get a few other people booked. But Jacob was the first, and thanks so much for sitting down with me.
Well, those are all my good friends, and I should have mentioned Arvin too. Arvin really hews the principle, and I think it's great. And like I say, any one of us that you just mentioned would be an outstanding president of this country, and much better than anything the Democrats and Republicans can put up. It's an honor to be in this race with all of them. And thank you, Chuck, for giving me the opportunity to share my views with your viewers and listeners.
Absolutely. Thanks so very much. And we're going to end the stream now. And I'm going to send you guys over to Torrent News with a raid here. And I'm going to end the stream. Thanks so much, Jacob, for sitting down with me, and good luck to you. So we're not, honestly, it's sort of up in the air whether we'll have a in-person national convention, but if we do, I'll be there. And if not, I will be there online. I currently serve on the bylaws committee, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with this Corona thing. But we will pick a candidate somehow, and Jacob is one of the big contenders. Thanks everyone for watching. I really appreciate it. And have a great afternoon.